Hey everyone, welcome to BRAP. I'm not sure, I may be having some audio issues here. Do you have Game Logic with me? Game Logic, can you hear me okay? I don't know if Game Logic has joined the chat yet, but let's see here. All right, looks like Hamp's here at the Discord. I hope we're not having Discord issues. All right, give me just a second here. Yeah, can everyone hear me okay? I guess that's the question. That's the $1 million question. Can everyone hear me in the live chat? Yeah, we'll see here. We can, okay, so Deaf Floyd says you can hear us. Let me check something here, because I think there's some audio issues on my end. Gotta love technology, right? I don't know if Logic can hear me. Logic, I don't know if he stepped away, or if he's not able to hear me. I don't know if he stepped away, or if he's not able to hear me. All right. Yeah, I don't know. Hold on a sec here. Worries. If Logic can hear me. Logic, are you there? Let's see here. I need to check something here. All right. Hopefully everyone can hear me now. I did shut down Logic Studios. All right. What's up, Detective C's? Can everyone hear me okay, by the way? Do another sound check here. All right, let's see. All right, Warrior says okay, loud and clear. Yeah. Yeah, there's something funny going on my end here. I don't know what's happening. I'm not even sure if Logic can hear me. Let's see here. Maybe he stepped away. All right. As I say, the show must go on. Sorry about the early technical difficulties, but welcome to a special BRAP. And as many of you could probably, as many of you know, there's a reason why we're doing tonight's show. Just a quick programming note, we will be having the regular scheduled BRAP tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have Detective C's joining us again. Thank you, Detective C. See you in the live chat as well. We're going to also have Creative Kofi on as a guest. So you definitely we're still going to, tomorrow night, we're going to discuss the studio closures at Xbox. that Microsoft announced today. We'll talk about that again today. Tomorrow as well. Get the panel members' opinions and our guests' opinions as well on this particular topic. So, yeah, absolutely, Seeds. Seeds says, absolutely, man. Thanks for the invite. Seeds, anytime. We really enjoy having you on the show and shooting the shit with you and discussing all things video games. But yeah, what a very, very, very tough day. First of all, my thoughts go out to those impacted by the studio closures. Layoffs are never easy. I've been living through layoffs for the past 18 months with my own company, and I am often part of the team that helps transition out those individuals who have been impacted by reduction in force. And for the last 18 months, to be frank, it's been a bit tiring. It's just not something you ever get used to. These are your colleagues that are impacted. Their livelihoods are impacted, and it sucks. It sucks. You have people who lose health insurance. You have people who have pre-existing conditions who are losing their health insurance. You have people who have families, have mouths to feed, that are losing a steady paycheck for a period of time. And it's unfortunate. And, this has been a rough patch for the gaming industry for the last couple of years.
Yeah, that was totally my fault.
Yeah, I was like, Logic, I see you in the Discord.
Yeah, so I've had the station set up for about, I don't know. So I did E2KG from here, and I did BRAP last week from here, but both times I had my Corsair Virtuoso USB dongle in here, my gaming headset that I use over here. And it aggravates me when it comes up in the sound, because sometimes it defaults to that for sound, but then sometimes it also just comes up in the list. And usually when I have it set up for podcasting, I don't have my gaming headset plugged in. So tonight, after I logged into the Discord, I pulled the dongle. Well, my audio was configured for the Elgato Wave XLR, but I guess when I pulled the dongle, it auto switched back to default. Okay, I see. So that's why I couldn't hear you.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, no worries. Welcome to the show, Logic. Always a pleasure having you on. Thank you again for your time this evening. And as you know, we're going to discuss the studio closures announced today by Microsoft, the Xbox first-party studio closures. And, I was, just discussing how I've been, for the last 18 months, and more specific to the gaming industry, for the last year or so, we've been seeing lots of layoffs. And I've been living the kind of this walking on eggshells feeling for the last 18 months with my own company and having to go through layoffs, and it just never gets easier, and it's unfortunate.
Were they really Xbox first party studios?
Yes. Well, I see what you're saying. Like Bethesda's its own entity, I guess, right? Or
well, just philosophically,
yeah.
If you're Bethesda, here are these studios that we bought and groomed and kind of had, assimilated into the fold. And was this the plan from the beginning? I just,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
There's got to be some emotion caught up there where you're particularly if you're one of the studios who was closed, here we are, we were doing fine when we were part of Bethesda, we get acquired, and instead of the corporate entity, instead of shutting 4 of its own studios down, right, they go after the people they acquired.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
After an M&A, actually, I was kind of funny. I was talking to, so I had meetings last week with a very large company, in our industry, and I worked at a very large industry, and I said, oh, I didn't realize you guys had bought so and so. Do people, how long ago did you guys buy them? And she said, and I was like, do you guys still kind of talk about, do you guys still have conversations well, why is that guy like after a meeting, why is that guy like that? And the answer is, well, he's a so-and-so guy. Because we've, like we acquired company, like the large company I was at, we acquired companies like in the 90s, and still here, at the time, like 20 years later, that culture had still not like gone extinct. They were still not part of like there were still distinctive lines drawn and lines you could identify. So I just feel like those cultural tethers, are still there to, Bethesda versus Xbox, us versus them.
Us versus them, yeah. No, I get that perspective. I mean, I've lived that through some M&As that I've gone through. I thought you were referring to that like Bethesda was kind of I don't think it was rolled up under Microsoft Studios or whatever it's called now. It was like you had your Xbox Studios, then you have ABK, then you have Bethesda. But real quick, I do want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thank you so much for coming out with us this evening and hanging out with us. Do me a quick favor. I'm going to drop a link in the live chat. Please retweet the link, share it on your favorite social media platform. Let everyone know that we're live. And also hit that like button. Helps out the channel. And if you're new, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. But these things just never get easy. They're just never easy, Hamp, these layoffs. And like I said, I've been living this for the last 18 months, and it sucks. It really sucks. We, as I shared with you last week, we went through a layoff again. And it was kind of like, surprise, everyone, attend this call. And then we got the news, and I kind of had a feeling it was that this was the news they were going to share with us, just because I've been through I've been through a few of these calls, quite a few of these calls the last 18 months. But it just, like I said, it just never gets easier, and there's real impact here to people's lives. And like I saw some people console worrying about this, and it's so ridiculous. Like, geez, like have the awareness to understand that like people's lives are impacted in a very negative way. No, Josh shares, I actually wasn't laid off, knock on wood. But yeah, I mean, there were other people, in particular my team recently, that were impacted by another reduction in force. But I've like I said, I've been living this for the last 18 months or so. So anyhow, all right, I do want to get to the news story here. Microsoft closing Redfall developer Arcane Austin, Hi-Fi Rush developer Tango Gameworks, and more. And what IGN had called devastating cuts at Bethesda. And this is the article by Wesley and Poole that was released today at 9:17 a.m. Microsoft has closed a number of Bethesda studios, including Redfall maker. I already read this. I'm not going to read that again. Alpha Dog's maker of mobile game Mighty Doom. We'll talk about how Matt Booty handled that email to Alpha Dog Games. Maker mobile games Mighty Doom will also close. Roadhouse Studios will be absorbed by the Elder Scrolls Online developer ZeniMax Online Studios. Microsoft, currently valued at over $3 trillion, did not say how many staff will lose their jobs, but significant layoffs are inevitable. IGN has asked Bethesda for comment. Microsoft declined to expand further when contacted by IGN. No surprises there. On Redfall, the disastrous vampire co-op game will now not receive promise updates, including an offline mode, new character DLC, as Microsoft has ended all development on the game. Microsoft said Redfall will remain online to play, and it will provide a make-good offer for those who bought the Hero DLC. Arcane Leon, which is working on Marvel's Blade, survives the call, as does Bethesda Game Studios, Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, Starfield. I'm not surprised by that at all, because those are marquee IPs for Bethesda and for Microsoft, especially Blade and Indiana Jones. And Doom developer, again, Doom being another marquee title for them. Doom developer, id Software is also unaffected. So we also, IG's also reported the email to staff sent by Matt Booty, who's the head of Xbox Game Studios. And I'll read the email below here, where Matt Booty says, "Today I'm sharing changes we are making to our Bethesda and ZeniMax teams. These changes are grounded in prioritizing high-impact titles, and further investing in Bethesda's portfolio of blockbuster games in beloved worlds which you have nurtured over many decades. To double down on these franchises and to invest to build new ones requires us to look across the business to identify the opportunities that are best positioned for success. This reprioritization of titles and resources means a few teams will be realigned to others and that some of our colleagues will be leaving us. And he goes on to talk about he talks about the change. He says, here are the changes going into effect. He mentions RK Austin. He said the studio will close with some members of the team joining other studios to work on projects across Bethesda. He then goes on to give a little bit of history of Arcane Austin and talks about Redfall. He then goes on to mention Alpha Dogs. Says the studio will close. We appreciate the team's creativity in bringing Doom to new players. Mighty Doom will sunset on August 7th and will be turning off the ability for players to make any purchases in the game. And he mentions Tango Gameworks, which I was shocked by Tango Gameworks. Tango Gameworks will also close. We're thankful for their contributions to Bethesda and players around the world. Hi-Fi Rush will continue to be available to players on the platforms it is today. Roadhouse Games, he says the team at Roadhouse Games will be joining ZeniMax Online Studios. As I mentioned earlier, Roadhouse has played a key role in many of our recent game launches and bringing them into ZOS to work on the Elder Scrolls Online will mean we can do even more to grow the world that millions of players call home. With this consolidation of our Bethesda studio teams, so that we can invest more deeply in our portfolio of games and new IP, a smaller number of roles across select Bethesda publishing and corporate teams will also be eliminated. Those whose roles will be impacted will be notified today, and we ask that you please treat your departing colleagues with respect and compassion. We will provide our full support to those who are impacted in today's notifications through their transitions, including severance benefits informed by local laws. I wonder if they're going to provide any assistance in transitioning them out, like offer them career coaching, helping with resume building, things like that. Well, probably not, but yeah. These changes are not a reflection of the creativity and skill of the talented individuals at these teams or the risks they took to try new things. I acknowledge these things. I acknowledge that these changes are also disruptive to the various support teams across ZeniMax and Bethesda that bring our games to market. We are making these tough decisions to create capacity, to increase investment in other parts of our portfolio, focus on our priority games. Bethesda remains one of the key pillars of Xbox with a strong portfolio of amazing games and thriving communities. As we look to the future, there's an impressive lineup of games on the horizon. In 2024 alone, we have Starfield Shattered Space, Fallout 76 Skyline Valley, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, The Elder Scrolls Online Golden Road. As we align our plans and resources to best set ourselves up for success in this complex and changing industry, our teams across Arcane, Leon, Bethesda Game Studios, id Software, Machine Games, ZeniMax Online Studios, and the Bethesda Publishing and corporate teams will be well positioned to build new IP, explore new games, new game concepts, and expand our existing franchises. Matt Booty. It's a lot to digest there, Hamp. A couple things kind of pop out here, and I want to go to you first with this. When he says we are making these tough decisions to create capacity to increase investment in other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games, what do you think he means by that? Like, because you and I talked earlier, and I know I kind of gave you what I thought could be happening. But when you read that or hear that, what do you think? What comes to mind?
I mean, what that quote sounds like to me is very much like the Embracer quote. We're gonna knuckle down on core tentpole IP that are kind of the guaranteed types of sales, and you're gonna wind up seeing less of things like Hi-Fi Rush. Definitely, I would expect, although it's not Bethesda, less of things like Pentiment. Grounded is a weird case for me, because I don't like it. The PR makes it sound like it's doing great, but that just doesn't pass the smell test for me of the type of game that would be like doing bonga on the current market. That it would have a niche crowd, right? But it wouldn't necessarily be moving mountains. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. I said that earlier. I said, I think this is them doubling down on those known commodities that they have in games and IPs, and just doubling down on that. There was something else he said about, where is it? I need to find this now in the email, that this is not going to maybe impact creativity. I need to find this here real quick. Yeah, he says these changes are not a reflection of the creativity and skill of the talent individuals of the teams or the risks they took to try new things. I acknowledge these changes are also disruptive. He said we're making these tough decisions to create capacity, increase investment, and focus on our priority of games. I thought there was something else here about creativity. But yeah, I don't think that this is. Oh, he goes. Oh, I'm sorry. Here at the end, Hamp. He says, that as we align our plans and resources to best set ourselves up for success, in this complex and changing industry, our teams across Arcane, he mentions like Bethesda Publishing, and corporate teams will be well positioned to build new IP, explore new game concepts. I'm not so sure about that, Amp, because of what he said about the capacity to increase investment on other parts of our portfolio and focus on our priority games. And I understand that, you can walk and chew gum at the same time, but I'm not, and also I'm at a point now, Hamp, as I was kind of thinking about this evening before you went live. I'm not buying a lot of I'm not buying a lot of the stuff that Microsoft is selling right now. I don't mean that literally in terms of buying their games. I mean, like when I hear them speak, I'm just not. I'm kind of looking at it side-eyed now. And later on the show I'll dive a little bit deeper into why I feel like that. But yeah, I just don't think that they're. I think you said this just a minute ago. I don't think we're going to see the hi-fi rushes anymore. I really think it's going to be a focus on games they know that are successes, that are their tentpoles for their game business, and I think that's where the focus is going to be. And I mean, I hope that isn't the case. I hope that we see that we still see those creative risks or those games that publishers or developers want to work on get greenlit, but I'm not so sure that's the case now moving forward. I mean, as much as they were excited and discussing the success of Hi-Fi Rush, I mean, Tango Gameworks was just shut down. And that's coming off, Hamp, and that's coming off a game where I need to pull this up here quickly. Aaron Greenberg, April 21st, 2023, said Hi-Fi Rush. He was actually responding to Jez Corden, and Jez Corden had asked what exactly determines success for an Xbox game these days. Hi-Fi Rush, as far as I know, has no physical version, no marketing, no multiplayer. If Xbox is pressuring ZeniMax to deliver sales of its games, maybe it shouldn't put so much emphasis on Xbox Game Pass. What's the goal here? Eric Greenberg replies, Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with the surprise release. But fast forward, literally a year later, Tango Gameworks is being shut down. And so I question, like, if you're saying, Aaron, that this game was a breakout hit in all key measurements and expectations, what happened? So that's why I'm kind of looking at a lot of the things. That's why I'm looking at them side-eyed here. And I'm just not sure that I'm at a point where I'm believing everything they say now. And I wouldn't say that I put all my faith in them before, but something seems amiss here. Reading Aaron's tweet, seeing what's happened with Tango Gameworks, But like how do we get here? Like we talk about the acquisition of ABK. We saw the Q3 numbers. What do you think were some of the things that led to these studio closures here at Xbox?
Yeah, it's interesting you should ask. I know it's getting very late. I was actually hoping to get out of here kind of early, but I think we got to do the detail. And so let's start with fiscal year 23 Q3, which would have been the beginning of last year. So we are a year into the announcement of the intention to acquire Activision. Xbox has not told us at this point that Starfield has been delayed or that Forza Motorsport has been delayed. So I don't think they've told us yet. I think they tell us in a few weeks, or maybe they did just tell us a couple weeks ago. But it says FY23 Q3 gaming revenue decreased 133 million or 4%, driven by a decline in Xbox hardware. Xbox hardware revenue decreased 30% on a strong prior year comparable, driven by lower volume of consoles sold. Xbox content and services revenue increased 3%, driven by growth in Xbox Game Pass. So at the beginning of the year, we are down on Xbox hardware. Content and services is barely eked out a 3% growth rate, supposedly based on Xbox Game Pass. FY23 Q4. Microsoft also makes Xbox devices, which are separated from its other hardware. These reports here now are starting from The Verge. Tom Warren, who is a pro Xbox journalist. Xbox hardware revenue has dropped, second quarter in a row, has dropped 13% in Q4. So it's likely that Microsoft continues to suffer with hardware supplies and softer demand for its Xbox Series SX. Now, the storyline at this point was that 2022 was an up year for hardware, that they had corrected their supply chain shortages. And so, there was a little bit of a softening of the decreases here at the outset of the year. This is at the point we're about mid-year. Or it could be related to Microsoft's long-term strategy in balancing the cost of hardware against content and cloud potential. I think we now know that is not true. Xbox content and services revenue, which includes Xbox Game Pass, was up 5%, though, at that point. Overall gaming revenue is also up just 1%. So this is one of the things, in fact, you and I talked about this earlier today, right, where I talked about a lot of conversation about Microsoft's performance, and I say, look at their gaming revenue, right? And their gaming revenue peaked in 2012 at like 7.5 billion, and then declined, cratered in 2019, and the 115 billion or so that they've spent on acquisitions since Mojang, right, has only allowed them to right that ship and get back to 7.5 billion in games revenue by about 2022, right? 2023, they went up another billion, but at that point, they were starting to add Activision revenue to that number. So here at this point, and I say this all the time, and here at this point, we have, again, a pro Xbox person doing the same thing of separating out content and services, in this case, actually separating out Game Pass and the notion of what's going on with actual gaming revenue. So Xbox Game Pass up 5%, overall gaming revenue up 1%. This suggests that Xbox Game Pass has grown year over year. Again, we know at this point that any notion of growth since 2022 has been nothing but churn, because the number has been flat based on Sarah Bond's statement during the business update. Despite Microsoft still not providing updated subscriber numbers, Microsoft had expected low to mid-teens for Xbox content and services revenue, so just 5% is a miss here. Again, grown by 5%, but under expectations and under what Wall Street was predicting. Microsoft CFO Amy the Hood, blamed the miss on weakness in first-party and third-party content performance. The CFO saying that there is a problem with first-party and third-party content performance. This is at the middle of the year, when they have had numerous delays on content that was supposed to come out, and have at this point delayed Starfield and Forza until the holiday season. That was what they reported in an earnings call today. So the list goes on, right? But if you look at it, and I think that it's important, and I've done this, I think, one time before, I think, presented my findings, but I think it's important that, we listen to the quarterly earnings, but we listen to the annual fiscal year earnings, right? But we don't often go back and look at the trend. And when you look at this trend of last year, this entire time while they were making great efforts to acquire ABK, it was bad news after bad news after bad news each quarter. And a lot of the things that were various people tried to turn into bright spots and say, oh, well, but this is up, but this is up. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, when you look at the details and you pull this stuff apart, you find a business that is not performing across almost all things that any rational person would think of as a financial KPI for a given P&L business unit. So, I mean, the news had been bad the entire time. And then they finally secured the acquisition. When you talk about the acquisition, Amy Hood was expecting that the total contribution from Activision that the ratio would be less, right? She accounted for their growth to be about 45 points attributed to Activision. It turned out to be 51 points attributed to Activision, while the rest of the division, right, showed that it would have been down by 4%. So again, financial indicators that their dependency on Activision was actually greater than they anticipated, and that still wound up in them not being as high as they expected to be and as Wall Street expected them to be. So the point of that is I think that before we got to this point, there were various indicators of potential problems that could be the causality, right, of us getting to where we are.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, Hap, and I think it's just been this snowball effect. Declining hardware sales, Game Pass subscriptions have stalled. Matt Piscatella put out another tweet today talking about subscription services still stalling. And that's just Game Pass. That's the industry, and so I just think it's a culmination of everything you just mentioned, plus the declining hardware sales. I think at the time, the first number you mentioned in terms of hardware, you see at the time it was -4% hardware.
So yeah, so if I remember this correctly, so Microsoft's fiscal years run. Is it April 1 through March 30, or is it July 1 through June 30?
Yeah.
I can't remember. But so the first number that I rattled off was overall revenue had decreased 133 million, or -4%. And that was attributed to a decline in Xbox hardware. And Xbox hardware revenue itself had decreased 30% on a strong year.
Yeah, and now we're at a point where we're seeing declines in Xbox hardware down 30%.
We're seeing about 30%. I mean, we're seeing between 13 and 30% like every quarter.
Yeah, and so there's that problem. And I said this before on the last show, or maybe 2 shows ago. You're going to have trouble selling software if you can't sell hardware, and I really believe that's why they made that decision to bring some of these first party titles. Like Hi-Fi Rush, Sea of Thieves, Pentiment to the PlayStation, and I really believe this, Ham. I think that part of this reshuffling is to also focus on being able to port games onto the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation.
Yeah, that fiscal year does run July 1 through June 30. So those first two quarters that I mentioned were January through March of last year, and then April through June of last year.
Yeah. All right. The other thing too, Hab, I think you mentioned Activision and the last quarterly financials we got, and we talk about if you remove Activision, how they were actually how they were very dependent on ABK, and if you remove ABK, you've seen -4% growth. Or -4% revenue in their gaming division. But I think the one thing that people don't think about is that when you start acquiring companies, there's now you're adding additional costs to the business. That money needs to be made up. Yeah,
your overhead goes up. So for people who aren't aware, and I'm not assuming that people are not, but just so as an employee, you have your salary, right? Let's say you make $100K, right? But your cost to the company will be something like $150K. Let's just say as a general thumb rule, right? Because the company is paying for the subsidization of your healthcare, they're paying for your seat which if you work on-prem, which will include, an incremental rate that is that winds up being the contribution for you as a body towards heat, electricity, square footage for for the building that you occupy. That pays for any other of your benefits, right, that go into that. Some of you as a person, right, comes out of their profit, right, to go into your pay raise for next year. So your total cost to the company is in excess of what you actually get paid. So when you onboard a bunch of employees, yes, they're bringing a bunch of revenue, but they're also bringing a ton of employees that you now pay for. Let's just say for instance, let's say that Activision's overhead rates were greater than the Microsoft norm, perhaps driven by, just leases where they were, or even the geolocation of buildings that the commercial real estate rate may have been higher. So those types of things have the potential to drive cost upward for a company in the event of an acquisition. From their FY24 Q2 earnings, so this would have been calendar last quarter of last year, Microsoft CFO Amy Hood expects overall gaming revenue to grow in the low 40% region, with 45 points due to Activision Blizzard. That means the rest of Microsoft's gaming efforts revenue could be down next quarter. Xbox content and services in Q3 is expected to be low to mid 50%, driven by around 50 points of net impact from the Activision Blizzard acquisition. Xbox hardware revenue will decline year over year for Q3. Says Hood. So Amy also is predicting ahead each quarter that she is seeing a declining business, minus their acquisition of Activision Blizzard.
Yeah, and I think that, and I do believe, Hamp, that these studio closures are part of the performance issues they've had, on top of increasing their overhead with the acquisitions of ABK. I mean, you and I've talked about this earlier today, and you had said this a while back, and I remember, and I'll share this with the chat here, but you had said something to the effect that Microsoft has spent about $115 billion to get back to where they were from a revenue perspective 10 years ago, back, I think 2014, is that?
In games. So if you isolate to their gaming revenue, and you look starting at 2012, they were at a high of about 7.5 billion. And this is what I was going through before. They were at a high of 7.5 billion. From that point on, they declined steadily and then cratered in 2019 at something like 4 point something billion. And then since 2019, they've been climbing out of that bathtub, right? And so again, as you're climbing out of that bathtub, right, the company is spending money out of their cash on hand to acquire companies. And what it has produced, what it has effectively led to, it has led to them returning to 7.5 billion revenue of game software revenue by 2022. And then by the time you start adding Activision content, right, then you start getting to like 8.5 billion.
Gotcha. Okay.
But the point being, if from an ROI perspective, like their ROI on the $115 billion that they invested in total, and granted, this was I had calculated this before the Activision acquisition. So really, like the 45 billion or so that they had spent on acquisitions prior to Activision, right, really didn't result in that much ROI in terms of adding to their growth.
Gotcha. Okay. I think Play's asking, he says, please lighten us on where the other 30 billion came from. I got 2 billion for Mojang, 8.1 billion for ZeniMax, 75.4 billion for ABK.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I ran those calculations like a year and a half ago during the acquisition, so they should be posted somewhere on my Twitter timeline, but I don't remember right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think you were also including some of the other studios they acquired as well, right?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. So this begs the question, Logic. What's next for them? I mean, and I go back to Game Pass. And I thought that the premise of Game Pass, and one of the things that Microsoft had talked about with Game Pass, is that it was an opportunity for smaller studios to get their games in front of gamers who probably wouldn't have even maybe thought twice about playing a particular game. And if they're canceling if they're not looking at creating another Hi-Fi Rush, which they claim was successful.
Hey, BRAP, I'm sorry. I'm gonna do something you very often do to me. But Dark Lord Alu or whatever in the chat. What? I mean, just flatly, like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, I get the sense that Dark Lord Alu is not all there. So Dark. Here's the thing.
You called BS on what?
Logic. I don't think he's all there. I've actually just looked at his last couple replies. I don't think he's all there. So Dark, if you can't behave, then you should just leave. And if you're not going to leave, we'll just remove you.
Or if you just can't keep up with like basic English and grammar, like I cannot understand how you can't comprehend what I've been talking about.
Yeah, like I said, I just don't think he's all there. Matter of fact, let me get a super chat real quick from Shivachu Prasad with the $2 super chat. Says, let's see Destin, Paris McCaffrey gaslight this. I don't know about Destin, but I can tell you that Paris and McCaffrey are not gaslighting this at all. Shivachu, actually, I did speak to Paris today, and he expressed more or less that he had a lot criticisms that he was going to levy towards Xbox, and I heard some of those criticisms, those concerns levied at Xbox on Kind of Funny with Greg Miller and Gary. No, I forgot his last name. Gary Whitta. What the heck's Gary's last name?
That's right, Gary Whitta.
Gary Whitta. Thank you. I said Whitta, not widow, but Whitta. Yeah. So thank you, Josh. Here's Gary Whitta. Yeah. So, but no, so, it just a lot of like, I'm thinking about a lot of things here. I'm thinking about all the things that Phil Spencer said about Game Pass being profitable, about, wanting to give developers the opportunity to be creative. I mean, there's a lot of things that Microsoft has said, Logic, over the last couple of years. And this is my biggest complaint with them. Well, actually, let me go back to the Game Pass thing before I go on this tangent here about their communication. But it begs a question, at least for me, Logic, that I just don't think they're going to take creative chances anymore. And I think for the reasons you mentioned when you talked about some of those financials, we talked about the additional headcount, the costs associated with those acquisitions, and the fact that minus those acquisitions, their business really isn't doing well. The fact that hardware sales are declined, the fact that Game Pass numbers have been stagnant. They only increased because they added the Xbox Live Gold subscribers to Game Pass. They transitioned those folks over. If Game Pass was supposed to be this opportunity for developers, first party developers, and we all thought that they were buying all these studios to feed the beast. We're supposed to get what did Matt Booty say? A AAA game every quarter. He said something to that effect. I just don't see that happening now. And I guess it's like, are they still dialed into Game Pass? Is that still a priority for them?
I mean, we haven't heard. I mean, we haven't heard what that drumbeat's going to be, right? Given the closures today. I mean, I think what kind of has to be true, right, is that we're not, and we kind of theorize this, right, that we're not done seeing the strategic changes, right? We got the business update in February, but there was no indication that something like this was going to happen. And I mean, it can't be bypassed that the closure of 4 studios at one time. I mean, I think my calculations are that is maybe about 300 employees across those 4 divisions, across those 4 studios. So, but regardless, like it can't be bypassed that like closing 4 studios all at once, right, is a pretty massive thing to do.
Yeah, it's go ahead.
And you know that with these layoffs, right, they're not something that you discuss and execute within like a 30-day time frame.
No.
Like they typically take months of advanced planning.
Yeah.
So at least we have to theorize this has been under discussion, like, and I'm being generous, at least since the beginning of this quarter, which means since before they did the business update.
Yeah, I think you're being generous, Hamp.
Yeah.
No, I really do. I think these conversations were happening prior to the business update. I think do think, in my opinion, I think that they were like, okay, these things need to happen or else. And those things didn't happen. And they pulled as many levers as they could or waited to see what the financials was going to look like. And the numbers came in and they're like, we need to cut these studios. We need to cut
I can absolutely guarantee that what has happened is that Amy Hood has given them a bogey. And she has said cut X amount of cost by blah blah blah. And they have, they put 10, 12, 15 different options in the blender, right? And they're going through those and they're picking them until they hit that target.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Hap. It's like Amy Hood's like, this is what I need cut from the budget, figure it out. Phil and team got together, they scrambled around, put their heads together, and figured out a way to cut the budget. And it was probably a scenario, I would imagine, in my opinion, that this is like, look, we need to cut X amount, we need to trim the budget. We need to align the studios that we have, the number of studios, the number of head count, to align with where we are as a business right now. But I'll tell you, Ham, I think if they'll probably get a blip, as often is the case, unfortunately, with reduction in force or the closure of studios. But I think if this trend continues, and we see like the similar financials from them, I don't think this is going to be the last studio they close. And I got to be, Hamp, you've talked a lot about the initiative on this show. They're one of the studios that came to mind today when I was thinking about who could potentially be next.
Well, I mean, the problem is slashing the initiative doesn't buy you that much because there's nobody there.
Well,
like they are a management studio. Like there's no one there but the leads, and they are doing subcontract management of Crystal Dynamics, and I think there was one other studio that got external studio that got added to help out.
Yeah, I forget who the other studio is, but the subcontracting piece isn't cheap either. And then I would imagine, like, we haven't heard anything about Perfect Dark in quite some time.
Right. I mean, the subcontracting piece isn't cheap, but you're also not paying overhead. So then at least your cost is linear, right? Like whatever the going rate is for that contractor or whatever the cost is of that sub-K that you let, like you're not paying healthcare and 401k and all that other kind of stuff for those other employees.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're not paying those burdens will fall on the company that's contracting, or in this case, forget who you said the other studio that's helping them out. Is it Idios? Oh, Crystal Dynamics. I'm sorry, Crystal Dynamics.
It's Crystal Dynamics, but like one other studio got added to help out like a few months ago. I can't remember who it was. Like at some point after like a lot of the Embracer closures started happening, and they made that mention of, Crystal Dynamics is fine, they're going to continue helping the initiative, but then subsequent to that, one other studio got added to help out, and I'm like, well, again, I don't see Crystal Dynamics as being safe, at this point.
Yeah, I don't either. Look, and frankly, I think if I don't think Perfect Dark was a big needle mover for them in terms of copies sold.
Give me Grindhouse Jazz says there's like 5 people, the break room attendant and a janitor at the initiative.
That's too funny. But it begs the question, who's next, Hamp? Like I'm telling you, I really believe if we continue to see the business performing the way it has been the last couple of quarters, things don't improve. They've made these acquisitions. That's not free money. I had explained that to someone the other day. That's not free money, by the way. that there's going to be more studios cut. I think it's unfortunate. We're not going to talk about the consolidation piece tonight. I'm going to save that for tomorrow. I've seen some people bring it up in the chat. I saw some people tweet about it. But I will say, Hamp, I have a hard time believing Microsoft now when they discuss metrics or the performance of their games. And I keep going back to this Aaron Greenberg tweet. Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with that team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release. So Aaron is saying that this game has been a breakout hit in all their key measurements and expectations. What are those key measurements and expectations, Hamp? Because that doesn't align. The math doesn't math there for me. Because to me, that's counterintuitive to what's happened today versus what he said a year ago.
Well, it doesn't tell a story of how that, like, a Hi-Fi Rush doing extremely well leads to the need to publish the game onto PlayStation. Is it on Switch as well?
I think it's coming to Switch. I'd have to go back and look. I don't recall, but I'm pretty sure. I think it is coming to Switch. But that's a great point, though. It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't give you a reason why those games. If it did so well, why is it going to, like you said, PlayStation, Nintendo? Yeah. Yeah,
it doesn't tell that story, and it doesn't tell the story of then why that studio got shut down.
No, that's what I'm saying.
It doesn't really necessarily make sense. And I mean, well, what's weird is, and I want to read this one tweet by somebody earlier today. What's weird is so cost centers would typically be an aggregate, particularly for something like Bethesda. Like, you wouldn't single out Tango Gameworks as its own cost center. You would, right? Bethesda would be a cost center, and there would be an overall, financier responsible for them as an aggregate cost center. And so if Bethesda is burning hot and going over budget, you wouldn't necessarily, see that the punitive action would be taken against Bethesda. That would only matter if, like, Tango Gameworks, right, was also running over budget. And that's the cost center level that you would look at it. But something Daniel Ahmad said on Twitter today made me think that maybe those things are changing. He says, it's becoming clear to me that as Game Pass growth has slowed, Xbox is increasingly looking to take an IP-first approach to its consumer-facing business. That's not to say service and platform aren't still important, but that it seems like Xbox wants its games to be profitable as standalone titles. So again, I go back to how Xbox revenue has typically been discussed, and it typically takes hardware and it lumps content and services. And while you can find the numbers that break out game content, they typically don't talk to that. But here is a suggestion that what the game business is doing, what the game software business is doing, is going to start to be looked at in a more isolated fashion. He says, previously, Xbox was looking at Game Pass as a way to offset development costs for its own first-party titles. It doesn't look like that's the case anymore. It also helps explain their recent exploration of releases on competing platforms. So what I asked him was, I said, if that were true, you should have been hearing something like or about P&L responsibility being pushed down to lower levels in the organization, where each game is its own cost center. Under that kind of framework, even studio heads for studios that had more than one project underway will be seen more as just resource managers. So for those of you who have existed in a matrixed organization where a manager owns a bunch of engineers and he farms them out to various projects, sometimes at full time, sometimes at partial time, sometimes he takes one engineer and spreads them across two projects, and that engineer has to work out 20 hours per week on each project. And then went on to say, even for a studio that only had one project, staff that were not 100% loaded or fully unloaded staff would be treated as matrix resources to be farmed out to other studios. That should be the kind of language you would hear in the voice tracks. And then I went on to ask them if they had heard anything of that nature. Of course, I haven't gotten responses from Daniel or Paris, but that type of view also is the type of view that I feel Sony was applying in the PlayStation 3 era and still is applying today, where for an individual studio, if your game did not do well, you would typically see that studio shuttered. And again, not in a, hey, you didn't make the grade, but just in a, hey, your game didn't sell well. We can't afford, right, for you to continue functioning as a standalone entity, right? Your guys need to be folded in with somebody else's, games that are hidden. Like, I mean, from a PlayStation perspective, and that has normally been the PlayStation mantra. My, for instance, is Ben Studio. Quite frankly, if Days Gone hadn't gone to PC and seemingly done really well on PC, I don't know that what Ben's future would have necessarily been. But I mean, what PlayStation has definitely obviously done is, I talked recently last week about Psygnosis / Studio Liverpool, and how those two studios are actually the legacy DNA of Firesprite, and we're seeing Firesprite being kind of slashed and cut these days. That's kind of normally been the PlayStation mantra, and we've talked on this show how, I heard things at DICE that inform me, and along with other information that other people have provided, that there's clearly some type of governance that goes on at PlayStation Network Studios, and there's clearly some manner by which your project has to come before, Jim Ryan in the past, or Herman Holst, and the two other women who are assisting him, or helping head up the studios along with him. There's clearly a point where your project hits periodic gates where it has to submit content, and you have to come brief for review, and you get feedback, right? And we've heard about games that have come up before that board before and been told, like, this ain't it, right? And they've been told to go back and continue working. So in contrast to, what we've heard at Xbox Studios, which, had that type of a regime been in place, then clearly you wouldn't have had something like Redfall. So, when you have something like Redfall, right, that's however hundreds of millions of dollars of budget that had been allocated to that team that now is not recouped, which gets you to, the point of where you are now.
Yeah, that's a great point, Logic. I do want to grab a super chat from Eric the Red 06 with a $5 super chat. Thank you for that super chat, sir. It says, what's next on the chopping block when games continue to not sell, and if Game Pass subs remain stagnant, would they cut budgets on their AAA games? I don't think they're going to cut budgets on their the marquee AAA games, like the Elder Scrolls games, obviously Call of Duty, those kinds of games. But yeah, they may not take more creative risk and newer AAA titles. I could see that happening if things kind of stay the course. The Game Pass situation, I honestly think, Logic, in my opinion, with Game Pass, I think it was I get the sense that again, I think about the leaked emails, Phil's testimony saying if we don't hit 100 million Game Pass subscribers by like 2027, there's going to be a different conversation about the Xbox business. So I kind of think that Game Pass maybe hasn't panned out for the way they thought it would. And I think the play here is them going full third party. I know you're going to say they're already third party, but I think they're going to double down, and I would fully expect them to. And I know Chris String has said this from GameIndustry.biz, that there's more that majority of their first party games are going to be going to PlayStation. I think that these studio closures, everything we've seen, the business update, I think that all points to that. And I think that's the future of the platform or for Microsoft. Bringing their software, like Satya says, we want to bring our games to where the gamers are. And to me, that is very Microsoft-esque. Bringing their software to where the users are. One sec here. I need to pull something else up. There was something else I wanted to discuss. So, Logic, you've heard me say this on the show a lot. This is another example, in my opinion, why Microsoft should just stop talking. Not Microsoft per se, but the Xbox leadership. Read the Aaron Greenberg tweet response to Jez Corden. Phil Spencer, and actually Janet Garcia. Now, she was part of Kind of Funny, right? I think you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I believe she used to co-host with Blessing for a while.
Yeah. So here's a tweet by Janet Garcia. She says, "Yeah, so many of Xbox's comments are aging like milk right now. This is the danger of selling the good guy narrative. It only works when you do good things. That said, this is also why PlayStation and Nintendo don't talk to anyone anymore. They're like, nah, I'm not going to play myself." I thought that was kind of funny there at the end. But Microsoft continually, or Xbox, the Xbox leadership continually hamp. They continually step on the garden rake. It's like, stop talking. Because when things like this happen, it's like egg in the face again. And we'll talk about this a bit more on BRAP tomorrow. But, you know, what I've been seeing now is people, content creators, question whether or not the Xbox brand has lost the trust of their consumers or consumers in general. And in part because of the things that they often say. There's that video, I think I shared this video in the BRAP DM, where Sarah Bond talks about the lessons learned of the closure of Lionhead Studios. Phil Spencer saying, one thing I don't want to push against creative one thing I won't do is push against creative aspirations of our teams. When a team like Rare wants to do Sea of Thieves, when a team like Obsidian wants to do Grounded, when Tango, we know what happened now. When Tango wants to do Hi-Fi, when everyone thought they were probably doing the evil within 3, I want to give the teams a creative platform to go and push their ability, to push their aspirations. And then here we are, they've shut down Tango Gameworks. And again, it's just more of the, you guys talk too much, keep your head down, deliver good games, execute on whatever business objectives, things that you're trying to do. Just focus on those things. Stop engaging with the community. Stop talking too much. Phil, stop being Socrates of the gaming industry and getting up on your soapbox and talking about how we need to tear down the walls, Mr. Gorbachev. We need to, just focus on making content. Focus on executing your business strategy.
Well, I mean, one of the problems that you and I have been talking about is, and again, we have these discussions in business, right? That part of your feedback loop is to kind of instrument your customer base, right? Just like you would software or infrastructure, right? To get that telemetry and have that inform your business development track. But what I've commented on before is you look at who Xbox has chosen to be their censors of the market, and it's quite clear that they're getting bad telemetry from that instrumentation, right? They're getting, in my opinion, misleading guidance, which is also the same thing that winds up in the Xbox fan base being misled, because the influencers that are tied in and plugged in to Xbox are misinforming that GLT about what it is that the market wants. And then they're turning around and informing the fan base about the wrong thing. Yeah. And clearly what we're seeing here now, and this is, I don't want to say sympathy. I do want to ask you a question, but yeah, I think clearly what we're seeing now is, I mean, part of the reason why we're seeing the videos of things said in the past that don't equate to things that are going on now, what is clear to me is that, remember, Spencer, before he was promoted to CEO, and Spencer has been promoted like 3 times since he came to power in 2014, right? He was raised up to be the leader of Xbox. Then he was given direct access to Satya without having to go through any of the leadership in between he and Satya. Then he was made CEO. I think he was maybe there was another incremental hop there where he was named like president of the business unit. So, but one of the things that's clearly, and so what I believe was happening, particularly at that time he was elevated to report directly to Satya, is that he was given a wide degree of latitude, right, to do what he wanted to do. And during that time, more and more tools were given unto his hand. He was given the DirectX team, right? He was given all these other resources, right, to do what he needed to do. But I think what we're seeing now is a lack of control by just the GLT. I firmly believe that they're hearing directly from Amy Hood, and I think Tim Stewart has gotten Amy Hood's ear, right? And there are some directives coming down from on high. And also remember, in the CEO CFO relationship, both of them report to the board. There is legal responsibilities for both of them. There's fiduciary responsibilities vested with the CFO. And in many cases, like, that CEO doesn't just get to do, even the CEO doesn't just get to do willy-nilly what they want to do without the CFO approving it. And in many cases, CFOs will dig their heels in and say that, I'm not going to do something, right? Because it's my head on the chopping block with the board. It's not just you. Satya has had to go to Amy Hood and justify and rationalize why he wanted to invest as much in AI. So I believe what we're seeing now is we're seeing now a little bit more of a dictatorship that has previously existed. And I think, like I said, I'm pretty sure that those guys have been given a bogey and told that they were going to have to do things. And I think they've been backed into a corner and they have to do things that they would maybe not normally not want to do, things that they've been able to shuck and jive and duck and juke and get out of the way of, right? And keep moving the peanut under the shell and saying, there's no problem here. There's no money being lost, right? But I think the time's over. I think the acquisition partially drove that. I think there was much more visibility and scrutiny given to the books. I think there was much more of a direct hand in the financial analysis that was going on before it was all said and done. Maybe not as much on the front end, but by the time, like, the thing was wrapping up, and then certain things were supposed to happen that it appears were not happening. And I think they're being told, I don't care what you told your fans, and I don't care what you told, right, your studios and your employees. There's stuff you need to get done. And if you need to, right, walk back over the snake that you put on the ground, then that's on you. You go figure that out. I don't care.
Yeah.
Right. Get the number down, hit the bogey.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point, Logic. I don't disagree with you. I mean, I think that's something that may have happened behind the scenes. I guess what I don't understand with them is, you know, you're listening to your fan base, right? You're saying they're getting bad. I forget what you said now.
Telemetry.
Thank you. I almost said bad feedback. You're getting bad telemetry.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, you're getting bad telemetry. And you know, it's. But are they not paying attention to how they're performing in the market? To me, like, I would imagine, like, if I'm listening to what my fans are saying, okay, and then I'm looking at how my business is doing, I would say, well, something's not adding up here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, something's just not adding up.
Well, for instance, look at the Game Pass number, right? So the Game Pass number holding, you know, in 2022 is holding static, isn't moving, nothing but churn. When did the price increase come? Like summer of 2023? So what that seems to indicate is they sat there and watched the needle not move, or at least flop all around, right? From an equivalent bandwidth of upside and downside, red and black going back and forth, right? And didn't make a decision to do something affirmative about it until summer of 2023.
Yeah, I just, like I said, Logic, I just don't understand. A lot of the time, I just don't understand what's happening over there. It kind of reminds me of the Washington Commanders. I hate saying that. I really do. And I kind of put this back on leadership over there. You know, Phil Spencer's been the head of Xbox for 10 years, a decade?
Right.
And I can say, based on their performance, that I don't think he's done a great job. Declining hardware, the Game Pass situation is stalled. And I'm not saying they haven't done some good things. I don't want to take away from the good things they've done. They've done some good things. I thought Game Pass, the idea of Game Pass, the potential value proposition of Game Pass, I thought that was a good idea. And I thought that was a good thing for consumers potentially. But that seems like it hasn't had the impact they thought it was going to have. Now they're porting their games to PlayStation, their first party games. It's almost like they've given up on, not totally given up on hardware, but also Logic. I think that at some point, I think that is a matter of time before they pivot away from hardware. I think I heard you say this maybe last week, that this sort of reminds you of Windows Phone.
No, I've been saying it for 2 years. Yeah, I mean, I've settled down on where I don't think that they're going to abandon hardware entirely. I mean, to the extent that it will matter to the mainstream consumer, I think they will. But like I've been saying, I think it'll become a boutique play, and it'll become something like Microsoft Surface. And I think they're going to move. I think they're going to move upscale. Well, I think they're going to move upscale and downscale, right? Meaning, I think they're going to give. I think they've solved, maybe, hopefully, the USB thumb drive problem in terms of cost. I don't know exactly how, but I think that's the thing that they're going to do for the low end instead of the Series S, and they're going to say it doesn't matter what specs it has because it's going to be just a cloud only device. And then I think they're going to take the high end SKU and move that upscale and make it more like a PC, because you don't expect to sell to more than 27 million other things anyway, and it's just going to be for your diehard fans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, and I don't know where this notion of the handheld fits in that. Maybe I'm completely wrong about them moving upstream, and maybe they're just going to do a handheld and a thumbstick, and then it'll just be kind of a low budget play, right? Yeah. It'll be just a companion device to go along with your PC.
Yeah. Well, one thing they should not say is that their next console, whatever it is, going to be the biggest technological leap.
Yeah.
They shouldn't say that, because again, it's almost like, hey guys, look, we're going to say it's the biggest technological leap, and look how our fans react on Twitter. We're good. Like, no, like that's such a small segment of the market, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I was saying to you earlier, Hamp. Like, I don't understand why they what I think is they place so much importance on what their user base says on social media, and they forget about the rest of the market. I mean, like, I have to believe they clearly understand the place that they're in, okay? But I just don't see them doing anything like to better their place in the market. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. If you don't believe me, I mean, look at the Q3 numbers. You know, people say, oh, well, they increase revenue, blah blah blah. But I'll do my Bill Clinton thing. Oh, we're doing well. Country's good. America.
But I think the main story of tonight that we wanted to get across was that I don't want to say that by any means that this should be accepted and this should have been expected. But I think what we do want to say is, like, look, the entire time that things have been looking bad, what we get back is the every week it's doom and gloom. Every week you guys are making up negative stuff about Xbox just to make up negative stuff. I'm like, if the financial numbers that I just rattled off were not the financial numbers, I would not be here saying you need to look at this negative trend line. Right? This is a show that, despite what you think or what you feel, does not make stuff up. Like, if these quarterly reports were coming out in a way with some veracity to the reporting that things were good, because I don't buy the things like, well, Xbox, Game Pass is profitable, but then I see a sheet that talks about accountability margin, right? Like, if things were being reported with some veracity, and if the football didn't keep moving, and and 1 year it was, games, Xbox Live Gold subscribers, and then it became Game Pass subscribers, and then we hear nothing about Game Pass for 2 years, and on the road to the point where we finally heard about Game Pass numbers, everything got switched over to MAU. If these were numbers that were being reported that were good, I wouldn't be here saying, hey, look at this negative trend line, because I wouldn't have anything factual, tangible, and evidentiary to point to. But what we've been trying to say is, when these things come out every quarter with negative trends, then that means something. It doesn't necessarily mean that the world is coming to an end, but at some point, you have to believe that something is going to be done. And there is a route through which we got here today, and it wasn't just out of the blue. I mean, for all the negative things that we say about Matt Booty didn't just wake up this morning and decide to crank out an email right? Shutting down 4 studios.
No.
Again, these have been lengthy discussions, and they've been lengthy discussions spurred by negative performance indicators.
That's a great point, Logic. Like a lot of these things that have happened, a lot of the things that we've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 years on this show aren't from a position of hate, because I see that, or that, like you said, we're making stuff up. They're just from it stems from the information they feed us on how the business is doing or performing. And then to your point, when we see things like, negative 30-day, I mean, think about this. You have 2 console SKUs on the market. One at one that is at the cheapest price point, entry point into next or current gen consoles. You have that, and then you have the high end Series X. You have those consoles available. You have this value proposition in Game Pass, and then you look at what the market is, how the market's reacting to your products, and it's not reacting in a way that's positive in terms of growth for your business. And we know that again by listening, when they discuss their financials and they release those numbers, and then you take that. And then you mentioned Game Pass. We don't hear anything for Game Pass for 2 years. Then we see those numbers. And then we hear this business update. And then we find out that they're putting some of their games to their rival platforms. Then we hear the CEO of Microsoft saying we want to bring our games to where gamers are. Then we hear the CEO of Microsoft at the last earnings calls, bragging about 7, I forget what it is, 5, 7, or 4 or 5 Xbox games being in the top 25 PlayStation games. I forget what he said. Something to that effect. Bringing up the fact that their games are doing well on a rival platform. So let that sink in for a minute, right? Like, what happened today is a result of all these things. And Logic, this isn't like a told you so moment. Like, I don't want people to think that. This is just a matter of, look, like, if you follow the breadcrumbs and you sit back and you look at what happened today, you probably shouldn't be surprised. And you shouldn't be surprised if this happens again. Or if they come out and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, in fact, the point is that, like, the whole point of informing people of that isn't so we can say, hey, look, here's what we predicted and we were right. Listen, I mean, I think if you listen to when we report these things, and then we finally get around to people, asking, well, what should we do about it? We have said, go play the games that are available in Game Pass, right? And go buy the games that are on sale on the Xbox marketplace, and send the signal that there is a demand signal for that content there. We said, go play Ayuden Chronicles. We said, go play Death Stranding. When it came, did it come to? It was on PC Game Pass, right? I think it was on PC Game Pass.
When they got Dragon Quest 11, I'm like, everyone, go play Dragon. Like, if you're a gamer, if people, Xbox isn't getting JRPGs and blah blah blah. They got you Dragon Quest 11. Like, Dragon Quest is not here at least, but in Japan it's up there with like Final Fantasy. Like, there used to be the Square Enix wars back in the days. Before they merged, or before Square acquired Enix, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Hamp.
Yeah, that's the point. The point is I think the message has been, people in the Xbox camp, people who that's your primary platform, you shouldn't be complacent or sit and be comfortable and think that everything is hunky dory, because what we've told you is we've pointed you at data that indicates that everything is not. And that the thing to do if you're going to try and mobilize and try and have an impact is not to be running your mouth on Twitter and coming up here in the chat and speaking Xbox C-suite talking points and talking points that you hear on other podcasts, but to actually spend time playing games. There's some people that we see show up in this chat who I literally can chart their movement across the YouTube gaming podcast circuit and see them showing up on podcasts Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I'm like, okay, maybe not Sunday, maybe they take Sunday off. like yapping about these talking points, and I'm like, when does this person play games?
Perhaps never.
we have data driven, right, discussions and things that have been presented that tell us when there is not uptake on games, right? When we can chart a lot of talk about how many people have played a game, but then we can see that not many people have hit achievements in the game, like early achievements, like easily obtainable achievements. That means that there's a ton of people who downloaded the game and booted it, but not a lot of people who invested and stayed with the game, engaged with it.
Yeah. Also, I think it's also important to point out that I don't think we're saying that that the Xbox is doomed. I think, and let me know if you agree with me, Ham. I think what we're saying here is, and at least what I'm saying is that there's clearly a pivot happening right now with their business model. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. They are going down the path of being more of a third-party publisher because they haven't been able to be successful in selling hardware. The Game Pass subscriptions has stalled. They're having trouble selling software. They had to acquire to grow, and that's fine. I mean, I get it. Companies acquire. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but this is a big pivot. I mean, everything that's and again, these things are done because of performance issues. Like if Game Pass was doing well, they were selling hardware. I don't think we would be seeing Hi-Fi Rush, some of these other games coming to PlayStation or Nintendo Switch. I don't think that'd be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you had 50 million consoles sold, then I mean, the story would definitely be different, right? And the causality would definitely be different.
Absolutely,
whether or not the outcome would be different. I mean, and my thing is that regardless of where the business model is leaning, to a certain extent, that shouldn't matter to an Xbox gamer. And this is what I often don't understand. Like the company itself literally reports that hardware sales are down 30%. And then people's response to that is, oh, well, that doesn't matter. Well, clearly at some point it does matter. And it matters to Amy Hood. And it matters to Tim Stewart, right? And as a result, Xbox is having to do things. That doesn't mean that, at no point, like I said, is anybody telling you, well, you should trade your Xbox in, you should get off the platform. No, we're saying, but what we are saying is, number one, if you like Xbox games and you like the ecosystem and you like consuming from there, please continue to do so and stop spending your time getting mad because somebody's reporting publicly available information. That's number one. But number two, you should also be cognizant of what's going on so that when things are announced that you should have seen coming, you don't have some big emotional falling out because you're caught off guard because you allowed yourself to be misled, right? But by influencers and podcast channels that are trying to monetize off of you. I mean, when the Saturn went away and the Dreamcast went away, particularly when the Dreamcast went away, when the Saturn went away, that caught me a little off guard. But despite being caught off guard, I made the decision to go out and buy a Dreamcast when it became available. And when they shut that down, I didn't go yelling and screaming and crying to anybody, right, about it. I didn't blame it on PlayStation. Right? I just said, wow, something I love is no longer available. I'm glad that I had the time with it. Let me start sorting my life out and figuring out what I'm going to do from here. But part of the reason I didn't yell and scream and cry about it was because I was reading the information and I was cognizant of what was going on with the business along the way. And I was listening to people who were talking about it and writing about it and not just saying, oh, well, that's media bias. They just hate Sega. They just hate the Dreamcast.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, Hamp. Well, look, Hamp, it is 11 o'clock. I wasn't planning on this being a long show, but we will be back tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'm going to have returning guests, Detective Seeds, Creative Kofi, and the panel joining us tomorrow. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Xbox studio closures. Want to get their thoughts on that, and we'll have some other gaming related news that we'll discuss as well. But Logic, I want to thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you won't be with us tomorrow night on BRAP. We'll miss having you on, but again, I know I'm going to get some people tomorrow. They're going to ask me where Game Logic is. So, but no, thank you again, man. I like I said, I always appreciate the time and always enjoy talking shop with you. So if you want to be found, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying thanks for having me on. Yeah, I think you guys will be fine tomorrow. The chat will be fine. I think you guys have heard everything that I had to say on this topic.
Yeah, Warwana wants me to do a 5-minute segment each stream. I don't know about that.
That reminds me. Actually, I do apologize. War had asked something earlier. I want to blow off his question. Man, the chat's been active. I have to scroll like 5 miles back. Oh, is it fair to say Microsoft may just buy some things just to hold talent, but the talent keeps losing? I mean, I've heard, I've seen theories that, this has been an IP play that, Microsoft, just bought people to own IPs. I mean, I honestly believe that was not the core intent. I think it was definitely listed as a contingency. I think because you have to, right? When you go through these discussions to get approval for the money, that, part of the litany of questions that come across is, well, what is the contingency? And the contingency, I'm sure, was articulated as, in the event that we buy these studios and things still are looking bad, that at least if we close them, we'll own the IP. So, and other than my theories about acquiring Activision so that you have the brain trust behind the Call of Duty production pipeline, which, I mean, you can see now, in fact, to even a certain extent, right, the churn that it's caused. Like EA is off running around trying to assemble the same thing, and you got the dude over there bragging about, oh, this is the largest Battlefield development team that's ever been put together. And when I saw that, I just put my head in my hands and shook my head. I'm like, that's great. You've gone off and created the MCU visual effects pipeline. Great. If you deliver another Battlefield out of that doesn't hit, what do we think is going to happen to all those developers? You're going to wind up seeing the exact same thing that you're seeing now across the industry and at Microsoft as a result of somebody trying to build this massive, gargantuan Voltron, right, that to put out a game that doesn't hit the metrics. So, I mean, I hope that it works out, but I also think it's a huge warning sign, and I don't fall down the hill of all this exclusivity and AAA games and blah, blah, blah. In my mind, all that can be managed. I don't think AAA needs to go away. I think it's fine. I think this is the thing. I'm sorry, BRAP, for keeping this going. This is the thing that drives me nuts. I'm like, why is the conversation always binary? Like, oh, AAA needs to go away. No, how about you put a cap on AAA and say that the budget is $200 million max and you don't get extra time in the freaking mocap studio, right? And if that means you need to cut a scene, then cut a damn scene. I don't know.
Don't make your game. Don't make all the games 100 hours.
We're right. Well, I mean, and I hate to go down this path, but like, I mean, this is the thing being voiced by the camp that's in the corner of people who clearly don't have a rigid, formalized governance system, right? Where you do have periodic check-ins, right? I mean, the rumor, I mean, is, maybe more than a rumor, right? Is that Phil had to get on a plane to go out to Bethesda, Maryland to find out what the hell was going on with Starfield? Like that's a clear indicator that there's not a governance system where a periodic project check-in is mandated. And we go through your over and under burn line on budget and level of effort, and we have a discussion if you're above or below the glide slope, right, and where you are on schedule. So again, I don't think AAA needs to go away, but I think it needs to be managed.
And I get the sense that that's probably what's going to end up happening. Logic.
Yeah, you would hope so.
I got the sense that that's probably going to happen at Sony, where it's like, wait a minute, like, why are we missing deadlines? Why are we, why is there extra mocap time? Like what? Like, I mean, really, I mean, like it's going to get down to kind of really looking at, the expenses and ways they can kind of streamline that development process to increase those margins. Sean Layton's talked about it. Like, look, not every AAA game needs to be 60, 70, 80 hours.
Right. I mean, you heard the things from Totoki, which again I think is much more so what Totoki is saying and what I gleaned from his statements than the wild extrapolations that it means Sony's going day and date and blah blah blah. Right. But what is guaranteed going to happen is what I just said. Like, Totoki's going to say, hey, because we heard references that that Insomniac just kept asking, right, for more and more and more, and it was green lit because everybody thought that they were building, the Mecca, the ark upon which all gamers were going to ride out the flood. Right. Well, the next time around, that's not going to be what it is. The next time around, you come up to a governance gate and you say, hey, we need an extra mocap day in the studio. The answer is going to be no. Najee Jeter was saying he was breaking mocap cameras all the time. Like, Totoki's not footing that bill next time.
No, he's not.
The Bungie team spends money left and right. Like, those mofos are not ordering sushi every day.
Yeah.
During the next development cycle.
Or it's gonna be a situation. Figure out how to do more with less.
Yeah. Yeah,
you guys need to figure that out. I mean, I don't buy the idea that AAA needs to go away, and that's the solution. I think there's ways to scale back development costs without completely eliminating AAA. And I also think that there's potentially some a coming to Jesus moment for AAA game development, in the sense that you and I talked about this earlier in the week, where it's like, I think you said it, like a 50-hour game will cost $70, then a 200. Or a game that may have $100 million budget will cost $70, but you also see a $300 million game cost $70. Does that make sense, given the different different size in budgets for those two types of games?
Well, I made reference to that thing Daniel Ahmad said, and I said, well, does that mean you see games becoming their own cost center? If that is the case, then yeah, that lends itself to, hey, if I got a game that's a $300 million budget, I'm probably going to charge more than $70 for that. If that cost center is responsible for making that money back, and they're not revenue sharing in a pool with a bunch of other studios in the cost center.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That means, and you talk about accountability, right? Because a lot of this is my discussion of like needing to drive accountability, right? You do something like that, you don't get a Todd Howard going off and spending whatever the hell it is that he wants to do, right? To build this wild gangly thing that winds up, and again, no offense, but like, again, I'm quoting the reality, right? In the publicly available information you can see, to build a thing that gets, right, a low 80 score, isn't well received by the Steam community, and doesn't win awards.
I thought Starfield was Game of the Year, Hamp.
I thought it was Game of the Generation until I saw, again, actual tangible data that told me Baldur's Gate 3 swept all gaming awards, which is the first time that's ever been done by a game in history.
Baldur's Gate 3 was an incredible game. Incredible game. All right, Hip. Any other thoughts before we wrap up tonight?
No, man. Play games. Play games.
Play games. And I said this earlier on Twitter. If you really want to support game developers, buy their games. That really, what I heard Sean Layden say that recently on What's Up PlayStation podcast, actually his last appearance, and I believe that was the last thing he said. If you want to support your developers, buy the games. Buy them. Buy the games. And play games. So, all right, Logic, if you want to be found, let everyone know they can find you.
Yeah, you can catch me on the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on Sunday nights at 8:45 p.m.-ish Eastern Time. You can periodically see me on talking about games on my own channel, Rounding Off Infinity, and of course here.
Thank you again, Logic. Appreciate it. And I want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I did need to ask you this one zinger question before I let you get out of here. Mm-hmm. If you're going to assign, I don't want to call it blame, if you're going to assign accountability for the closure of those 4 studio today as a matter of percentage, who are you going to assign the bulk of that accountability to? Who do you think was the driver behind those studios being closed? Because we all pinned the tail on the donkey on Matt Booty today. But do you think that the vast majority of that goes to Satya or Amy Hood or Matt Booty?
Good question. I'm going to say Amy Hood.
Yeah, you think she held she held the GLT's feet to the fire and said, "Bring me the heads of 4 studios, right? You pick them."
Yeah, I mean, I just went through this last week. Hey, the head count isn't where it needs to be. It's not aligned with our budget and our forecasting for the rest of the year. You need to make changes. Figure it out. That comes from the bean counters, the finance people. Absolutely, Amy Hood. And I don't disagree with what you said earlier, Hamp, that that after the acquisition, after they fronted that amount of money, that Microsoft, the Xbox, really put themselves under the eye of Amy Hood. Like, I don't think you said under the eye of Amy Hood. I don't think you framed it that way, but or said it or used those exact words. But it's Don Matrick's fault. War one with the $2 super says it's all Don Matrick's fault. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, let me say something impolite. Since we're here near the end of the podcast, I think it was Amy Hood wrote that check for $70 billion, and then she turned to Phil and said, "I now own your balls."
Oh, yeah, Phil, pay me. I need this money back. Like the scene from Goodfellas. F you, pay me. But yeah, I don't disagree, Hamp. This is Amy Hood. I really believe this is Amy Hood. She's looking at the numbers. The math isn't mathing. They're probably not hit. They're not. I don't think they're hitting projections. They're hitting those forecasting goals. You got to figure it out, Phil. You got to figure it out. I don't care who it is, but you need to make cuts. And I got to be honest with you. I said this earlier in the show. I don't think this is going to be the last. I don't think these will be the last cuts unless things turn around. I don't think there's going to be the last cuts for Microsoft.
I mean, in the notion of that bogey, I don't have the feeling. And again, this is just on instinct. Like in my gut, I don't feel like they've hit that bogey yet. I think she's telling them they got to figure out how to get the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see a lot of people blaming Matt Booty, questioning. And I think we've been critical of Matt Booty on this show too. I know you have in particular. I'm not resting all the blame solely on Matt Booty, but things got real once they made that acquisition, and that's something that I've heard from a lot of people who have talked to people at Microsoft and the Xbox division. Who have said that once the Activision thing came, they kind of feel like maybe it really put a lot of eyes on the Xbox division, and maybe that wasn't a good thing, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to ask the panel tomorrow night that same question, Logic. I would be interested to see what the rest of the panel has to say.
Yeah, because just as I thought about it today, I was like, man, we're putting all this at Matt's feet, and I'm like. I mean, somebody above Matt told him something had to get done, and I'm sorry, I don't think that was Phil.
No.
I just don't think he has the wherewithal.
Yeah. I think it was Amy and Tim Stewart looking at the numbers, looking at their projections. Projections aren't looking good. You said it. They have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. Shareholders, we got to keep them happy. We don't want this bullseye on our back. We got to make some cuts. We need to make some hard decisions. And Phil, you need to instruct your team to figure that out. Or Phil and company, you need to figure that out.
Yeah, and I want my man Tim Stewart in the room when you guys are having that discussion. I don't want him coming back to me telling me anymore that you guys are cutting him out of the loop. He's my boy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We do CPE training together. He's my homie.
Yeah, and look, we've walked through the causality right behind this, so at this point we should not continue to be hearing it's Sony's fault, it's Nintendo's fault, dirty Sony and Nintendo make it hard for Xbox. Like no, like that's not the case. Like it should be patently understood, right? It's not because Apple made their new iPad so expensive.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, things got a bit personal there.
I was like, yeah, oh, I'm gonna let that one slide because I was gonna say something, but I'm like, I'm not gonna open up that.
I'm a little salty about that Apple event this morning.
A bit pricey. Who asked for that?
Yeah, anyway. And they're so expensive now that you may as well go buy a MacBook Pro.
Yeah, that might not be a bad thing. So, Josh here says Xbox makes it hard for Xbox. I don't disagree with that, Josh. I don't disagree with that at all. Somebody said I blame Biden. It's Biden's fault.
It's the liberal agenda.
It's forced inclusion. My goodness.
DEI, Sweet Baby Inc.
Oh, I knew that was coming. Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us this evening. Again, we will be back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to have special guests, actually returning guest, Detective Seeds, second week in a row for him, and returning guest Creative Kofi will be joining us as well. So please join us tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Please give Game Logic a follow. Check out his show, E2KG. Logic, are you going to be doing your morning news show? I always forget. What's the name of the show again? I always forget.
Tag, talking about games. Well, it's very funny.
Talking about games.
You should mention that, BRAP. So I'm going to take us on a little bit of a story. I'm dragging it out. So I had full intentions to go live this morning. There were some bandwidth problems on the Central Eastern Seaboard this morning. So lots of things were down at the time when I was trying to go live. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll do it tonight. And then, of course, BRAP goes, hey, man, you available for a rant tonight? I was like, well, I can't tell you that, I plan on doing my own thing tonight. By the way, my script was a prep, because the other thing that was funny, but not funny, but was, as I was writing the script last night, I was like, man, nothing has gone on except this whole Helldivers 2 fiasco. Like, there's just not any news. Like, there was a report that Vicarious Visions was working on a Donkey Kong Country sequel. That got canceled. Like, that's the only thing that was in the news. And then I woke up this morning while I was having these problems with bandwidth. And so some of the times while I was waiting for my router to reboot, I was on my phone, right, going through the news. I saw this thing about Remedy getting its project, canceling one of its projects. And then I'm still scrolling pretty deeply through like the gaming news bookmarks that I have. And then finally, like this story comes up, and I'm like, oh, frack. Like, so suddenly there's a lot of stuff to have to take care of and read. So yeah, I'm not sure. I would like to be able to pull off something Thursday, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of Tag. I like it's like getting your morning news. Grab a cup of coffee, get your morning news. So yeah. I'm gonna try and do it in the morning. A few wonky things going on today. Definitely can't do it tomorrow. I got contractors coming in the morning, but yeah, for people who are into that stuff, it's about I dive deep on a lot of like I said, most recently I went through Firesprite and their history, at Studio Liverpool and Psygnosis, and their relationship with Sony Computer Entertainment, which is what it was called when Psygnosis was originally acquired in the 90s. And dug back through some of that history. I've been walking down Ubisoft's report card from everything they announced at their last showcase, and how that game actually, whether or not that game actually came out, what its Metascore was, what we know about its sales, just as kind of part of the ramp and walk up to the next showcase this summer. So if you like really detailed, meaty stuff like that, and I think I cover a lot of stuff, and definitely a lot of stuff in a lot of detail that is not, kind of what you typically hear covered on most of the, YouTube, circuit of podcasts. So if you're into that sort of thing, feel free to stop by whenever I announce that I'm doing another one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please check out the morning show. If in fact he does it in the morning, it's actually refreshing, Logic, and I mean that in a very good way, as a compliment. But yeah, thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. If you're new to the show, subscribe, hit that bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. You can find me on Twitter or X at BRAP_podcast. And again, we'll be back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you then.